Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Ace on Music. I'm joined by Sean, and somewhere around here is Wandering Boomer. So this week, I first of all just wanted to send out our deepest condolences to all the people that are suffering in the conflict that's going on in between Ukraine and Russia right now. That is an area of the world I have visited several times. I have been both to the Ukraine and to Russia. Fantastic countries, great people, and I hope things get settled down there soon because we love playing there. So, in any case, today I wanted to talk about vinyl. Now, over the years, we have gone through many, many different formats of the way that music is delivered to us, originally, we had reel-to-reels and things like that, and it went to obviously vinyl was a bigger deal back a number of years ago. Got taken out by cassettes and 8-tracks, and then we moved on to CDs and mini discs, and now we're into streaming and etc. But the interesting thing that has happened in the last number of years, if you've been living under a rock, is that vinyl has made a huge comeback. For some reason, people just really seem to be back into the warm feeling of vinyl, as they love to tell me. There is some major problems with that in today's modern world, which we're going to discuss today. But I wanted to spend a little time with Sean here. He's a huge vinyl fanatic.
For many years.
And
no storage space.
No, and if you were to look around this room right now, almost every wall is covered in vinyl. So I have my fair share as well. But there are reasons why I have it, and they tend to differ from why most audiophiles love it. But anyway, let's start with vinyl in general. When you started loving music when you were younger, because you're about 5 years younger than me.
Right. 71.
So you're 71. So when you started getting into music, how old would you have been?
Oh well, it depends on what
you're first buying music.
The little 45s with the tugboat stories and all that. That's what really got me started. I actually started listening to vinyl records, stories, and movie soundtracks, Star Wars, Close Encounters.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, and stuff like that. My grandmother got me all into that stuff, and I think, then I transferred over into rock.
So late 70s.
Yeah, late 70s. I started I think I got my mom's record collection, and she had like Grateful Dead and stuff like that.
Oh wow!
Which I didn't understand too much about, but
my mother had things a little more eclectic than that. My mother loved show tunes, so I had a lot of Broadway soundtracks and big band music. That's where my love of big band comes from, was from my mother. So, but there was something magical, I think you'll agree, magical when you hold the vinyl and you see that artwork. I mean, it was all about the artwork for me.
Right.
The cover art, it was just, I would sit there for hours staring at it as I listened to the music. It was always just such a treat. That was really lost on me when it came to CDs. I mean, CDs, you got about 1/4 of the size of the artwork you had on the vinyl. I mean, there were attempts along the way to try and repair that. You had, I know when CDs first came out, you remember the long boxes?
Yeah.
They would come in these environmentally horrible boxes that would have the cover art and all that sort of thing.
I think they're making a comeback from what I understand.
Oh, jeez. But, and then I also even saw some very limited attempts where they were actually taking vinyl-sized cardboard and kind of storing the CD in there, but that didn't really ever catch on. But somewhere along the way, about, I don't know, 15 odd years ago, vinyl started coming back. I think at first it started because DJs were looking for vinyl to, because scratching and that sort of thing became a thing to do. But it caught on way bigger than that, to the point where now LPs or vinyl are the biggest selling physical medium of music sold today.
Well, in 2021, it sold more vinyl in almost 30 years.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, I personally like it, although there are some inherent problems that have come along with this. the first, and I think Sean will agree, biggest problem is there seems to be a lack of quality control. A lot of the new vinyl that I'm encountering is subpar, I would say. Would you say that's your experience?
Beyond sometimes. It's ridiculous.
What are some of the ones that you've encountered recently that really were?
It's going back for a while, the last few years actually. I don't know what's going on with like you said, there's no quality control in these plants, and I don't even know if the people that are buying these records are actually putting them on a record player, because I just remember buying David Bowie's Black Star album. I was looking forward to hearing that and playing it, and it was horrible. It was just warped and scrapey, and I returned it, got another one, same problem. Returned it. I didn't buy it from Amazon again. I went to a record store, the same problem. I guess wherever they printed these records, they had quality control issue. But what really tripped me out was everyone complimented how great the album was and all the reviews, and not one person complained about quality control. And it made me think, I'm like, how many people are actually putting these on a record player,
Yeah.
Because you would think someone would be like, man, this batch of records is crap, but, come on, 3 out of 4 records I bought were messed up.
You had problems with the new Danzig as well, if I remember.
Yeah, it was warped. There's been a lot. New Danzig's album was warped. Danzig Sings Elvis, and a few other ones, actually. I can't think of them on top of my head.
You see, this is part of the problem, of course. We want... Having the vinyl is one thing, but of course you want to be able... If you are one of those, what sounds like relatively rare people who actually wants to listen to the vinyl... that can become a big issue. And, there's various formats of vinyl. I mean, they have the heavier duty ones, the 180 gram vinyls, which are, they use more physical vinyl in there. I remember there always being the big thing about the Japanese pressings. Japan always seemed to take special care in their pressings. They used only virgin vinyl, in other words, not vinyl that had been heated before, and so you got a superior pressing out of it. And it just seemed that the pressings that came from Japan always had a little bit better sound.
Are they still like that? Do they still?
I haven't tried a Japanese pressing since back in the day, so I don't really know. I probably haven't bought a Japanese pressing since the 80s.
Well, no, you did go to Japan and you bought me the Queen vinyl.
Yeah, I bought that for him.
Oh.
I haven't heard it.
I heard it. It sounded great.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And there was always one special thing about the Japanese pressings, and that was the obi strips. Now, I wish I had one here handy to show you, but basically whenever you would buy a Japanese pressing, there would be this strip of paper that was kind of wrapped around one end of the vinyl, and it basically did the description of the album in Japanese. And the other thing about Japanese pressings was that there was some kind of a law on the books in Japan that any music that was sold in their country had to have the lyrics included. So if you got a Japanese pressing of an album like that, you would get a lyric sheet. Now this was often problematic as well, because in order to comply with the law, many labels over there would just have somebody on their staff translate it into Japanese, and some of them didn't really understand English too well, so it sometimes came with some pretty hilarious errors. But regardless, I always treasured the Japanese pressings. The problem with them was they were also tended to be very pricey. When back in the day when you were paying $10 for a vinyl, a North American vinyl release, you might pay 25 or 30 for a Japanese. But
they would always have like a different song on there, right?
Yeah, well that was what the way, and to this day it still exists, that whenever we make a deal with a label, the Japanese portion of the label always wants a bonus track, because the vast majority of the money they make from selling theirs is through exports, because the collectors want that extra track, and so they're willing to buy it from Japan and pay the extra money, and that's how they make that money. So they always demand the bonus tracks. Believe me, it's an ongoing thing. But the issue that has now began to manifest itself is that in the 70s, when vinyl was big and when it started phasing out, of course, less and less vinyl was being pressed, and so these big pressing plants started not having the business to support their staff and all that, and many of them went out of business. there was always kind of a boutique thing that continued on through the thing where, you would occasionally see special vinyl releases of certain albums. It was very specialty and very collector kind of thing. And so the bottom line is that almost all the pressing plants in the world went away. And then suddenly it came back into vogue. And, well, there isn't even any companies that manufacture the machines that do the pressing. So
hence quality control, right?
Hence quality control, and also backlog.
Backlog, yeah, it's a big deal right now.
It used to be that when, speaking as a manager, when we used to turn a record into a label for release, we would make a battle plan about how it was going to get sent out or whatever, and usually within 3 to 6 months at the most would be from the time you deliver it to the time it would be out to the public. That has gone out the window these days. Like right now, when we are planning to release a new record, there's about currently a 9-month waiting time to get vinyl pressed. And because it's the biggest selling format, we can't just release the album and then like 6 months later put out the vinyl, because we'll just hamstring our sales.
From what I understand too, Ace, is that they go by a seniority or priority. Like if Adele, like one of the biggest selling albums of the year, is going to be selling on vinyl, they'll make sure all those are printed out and it backlogs everything else behind it.
Well,
from what I understand,
I'm sure that, it only makes sense that if you're a big label and you're giving a lot of business to a pressing plant, then you can throw your weight around a bit.
Right.
So if you're a smaller independent one, there are organizations that got lucky. Like, I'm not sure about the complete details of the story, but I have been told that there was a find. Apparently, somebody found a bunch of LP pressing machines that had been mothballed and put into some barn or something somewhere and stored away, and those got found and restored. And rumor has it that Metallica bought them, and they have their own pressing plant, and so they press their own stuff, so there's no delay in getting their stuff out. And you may have seen that manifest in the fact that they have been making special colored editions that show up in certain retailers. That you bought one recently, right?
Yeah, like a Walmart has special colors for I think Ride the Lightning's blue, and then Master of Puppets is gold, and then
there you go.
Kill 'Em All's red.
Back in the day, you had your black vinyl. You occasionally had some colored vinyl. You had your picture discs as well.
I had tons of those.
Yeah, picture discs were always cool. I remember the first one I ever got was Boston's first album. Everybody had that one.
Mine was Iron Maiden.
Iron Maiden, okay, well. I've got many of them in my collection now. I remember back in the 70s, they used to say that because the vinyl had to be thinner in order to allow the image to come through, that you had a lower quality of an LP if it was a picture disc. I don't know if that's true. I'm sure some of you audiophiles out there can chime in and talk about that.
Well, I could tell you, it did make a big difference in the sound. Some of it was horrible.
Okay.
But a lot of those picture discs were kind of going through third-party manufacturing back then, too.
And there was other cool things they did. Like, I remember getting some, especially singles, when they would do, like, 12-inch singles from a band, and they would put music on one side and they would laser etch it with an image onto the vinyl on the other side. That was always kind of cool. And maybe the coolest thing I ever saw any artist do was Monty Python. As strange as that sounds, they did a comedy record. I think it was Instant Record Collection. Don't quote me on that. It was one of their seminal comedy albums, and they did a special pressing, which I have a copy of somewhere here, where it depended where you put the needle down, and it was double grooved, so that depending on where the needle started, you could hear an entirely different dialogue, and then put the needle back at the beginning and hear something else entirely, and it was just drove some people nuts.
I kind of had a record like that. It was a bootleg album. I won't mention the name. Allegedly, supposedly. I kept putting the needle on and it would fall off. I put it on and I was like, what the hell is going on? So I put it up into the second track to see what was going on, and it would play normal. But the needle was going backwards.
I've heard of that too, where they reverse press it.
Yeah, what the hell is that? You have to play it from the end.
Yes.
And then it goes out backwards. but it's playing in the right direction.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
I never experienced that before.
But there's all kinds of fun things that can be, and I've noticed that especially in today's market, they've really got some really cool things they're doing with some of the vinyl. I mean, they've gone beyond just colored vinyls. They now have vinyls that have like patterns on them and almost looks like color splashes over them, or all kinds of neat things that are happening.
I know Waxworks put out. It was a zombie one. God, I can't think right now, but it actually had liquid in it.
Yeah, and in fact, I've seen some really fascinating. If you want to see some of the coolest things that are coming out on vinyl, check out Third Man Records. That this is Jack White's from the White Stripes. He has a shop and an organization based out of Nashville called Third Man Records, and they are all about the vinyl, and they've done some really cool things with vinyl beyond the norm. And then I also had one really neat one that I showed you a while ago. Any regular watcher of this show knows that the Residents are one of my favorite bands of all time. And they did a crowdfunding thing a little while ago where they they basically did 3 vinyls that one was like the 12-inch, and it was only about this wide, so it was almost like a hula hoop kind of thing. And then the next vinyl was another hoop that fit inside of that, and then the third one was a little. So you basically had 3 vinyls that kind of made a 12-inch all together if you put them all together. It was a really cool idea. So there's some fun things happening, but you know what Sean said earlier, I think, is at the crux of what we're talking about here. Is are people? Any audiophile I always talk to, they always give me a very similar or variations of the same argument, and that is, oh, vinyl has this warm feel. You know, it's superior than listening to CD. Now, I was curious about that a long time ago, so I talked to some producers. I mean, I'm in that position where I can talk to experts on audio and ask them what their take on that sort of thing was. And I said, is it really better sounding on record? And they said, well, actually it is. And that's because when you have a CD, you're not hearing all of the music. And I know that sounds strange for me to say. When a CD is created, it's digitizing the music. And what it is doing, the computer that is digitizing the audio is sampling the music once every, or how is it, 44,100 times a second. Staggering number when you think about it. But regardless of how big that number is, that still means that there's going to be little pieces of audio that are missed. And audiophiles always tell me that kind of gives it a mechanical feel, or you lose the warmth. That term, they use it all the time, warmth.
Right.
So I personally am not that sort of person. I listen to CDs, I listen to vinyl, I listen to streaming. I don't care. I mean, I just get into the groove of the music. And I mean, I have friends who have spent like the equivalent of what some people spend on their house on their audio equipment because they want to have the ultimate experience. But
they got record players at almost $250,000.
Yeah, it's staggering. It's staggering to me how much you can spend on a turntable.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And at the end of the day, the medium is still the thing that holds you back. I mean, I don't think I've ever put a record on a turntable and listened to it where you didn't hear some pops and cracks and things. I mean, it's just the nature of the environment you're in. There's always going to be, whether it's static or dust from the air or whatever. I mean, there's lots of tools that you can use to minimize that, but it's always going to be there.
Right. Yeah, but to me, honestly, I think it's just 2 different sounds. Like, you throw a CD on, headphones sounds great. You get to hear every little detail, and then records, it's a different feel and sound of the music. I know, a lot of people say warmth and everything, but it's a different way. It's kind of an analog, digital going into analog, coming out of speakers, but
yeah.
So
I mean, that's interesting. I know that you always, well, I'll say 99% of the time, go for the vinyl.
Yeah.
If that's the option.
Yeah, well, now we got iTunes and stuff, and everything's digital, and it's, lossless audio now, so it's just as good as CD quality, and it's like, well, I like to look at records, and and I think I have so many damn CDs, and it just takes so much space, and
Well, but if that's your argument, CDs take a lot more space or a lot less space than vinyl.
right, that's true. That is true. But yeah, it's just something about having that vinyl, though, and so,
The thing that excites me about vinyl these days is there's some really cool things that are being released on vinyl that never came out on any other format. Sean a moment ago mentioned the company Waxworks, which we've talked about on an after-hour show before, but Waxworks is a really cool little company that specializes in putting out soundtracks to movies on vinyl.
majority horror and sci-fi.
Yeah, they tend to focus on horror and sci-fi, although there are they do step out of those sometimes, but that's the vast majority of them. And Sean and I are both big sci-fi and horror fans, so
Yeah,
but
definitely.
it's there's a lot of things that they put out that never saw the light of day. I mean, let's be honest, most movie soundtracks never get released as a physical product, unless it's like a soundtrack where it's made up of pop stars or music, or like what we talked about last week. Say, take heavy metal. I mean, every band on that soundtrack had put out their own records already. But if you're going to just listen to like the orchestral score from Howard Shore for this film or whatever, odds are 99% of the listening public doesn't really give a crap.
Right.
So but that is another niche market, and they are doing that sort of thing. They're putting those vinyls out. I know I have bought a number of their releases because I'm just excited about what they did. Like, for example, John Carpenter, one of my favorite filmmakers. He's also famous for the fact that he does the soundtracks to all of his own films. Now, the soundtrack he did to his all-time classic, The Thing, is a really well-known soundtrack. A lot of people know that one. It did come out on CD back in the 80s or 90s or whenever it came out, and I have a CD copy of that soundtrack. But Waxworks took it and they released it, but they also added a bunch of the stuff that was removed from the film soundtrack, the little orchestral ins and outs that happen in various scenes. And so that was exciting to me because I love that whole soundtrack. And are there any that really stand out to you from the last little while?
As far as movie soundtracks?
Yeah.
Oh, it's all John Carpenter stuff, man. I like The Fog.
Yeah, that one they just did recently.
Halloween's, it's just...
Halloween's maybe the
yeah.
most famous piece. One of the ones that I got recently that was really cool, it's right here in the rack, is the incredible Mandalorian series that's on Disney. They put out an 8-disc set, because it was 8 episodes in the first season of The Mandalorian, and they had an LP for every episode, the entire soundtrack for each episode of the first season. Really cool stuff. And it's not since John Williams has there been a soundtrack as effective as The Mandalorian in the Star Wars universe, as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that was represented to me when the Book of Boba Fett, when they were trying to decide how they were going to defend themselves late in the series against the incoming bad guys, and all it took was the theme song from The Mandalorian where you knew what was going to happen. So.
Right. Exactly.
But what if you were to step back and just look at it a little more objectively? Why vinyl? What is it that just keeps you in that camp?
I don't know. Maybe nostalgia a little bit. Making it's like having that warm cup of cocoa. Every once in a while. It's something that can't be replaced, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just something I've done for my whole life. I don't know any other way, but to enjoy music the most.
Actually, Sean has one thing that he loves to collect on vinyl that I'm a little bit jealous of. He has a considerable collection of Halloween-based records, whether it's soundtracks or scary stories or all these
sound effects.
Yeah, all this stuff. It's really cool stuff.
Yeah, I've traveled around the world with you, and I've collected quite a few good pieces. And Yeah, I think I've gotten most of everything that's actually put out there as far as Halloween and scary stories and stuff. That's why I like Waxworks when they release new stuff. It's cool.
Well, that's another thing that happens is it doesn't happen as much anymore. But back when vinyl had lived its first life, in almost every country, because vinyl was such a big deal, in almost every country, the affiliates of the labels in those countries would press their own version of a record. So if let's say that Cheap Trick put out a record here in America, well, the Canadian division of that label would press their own version. The UK version, the German version, the Japanese version, there was a ton of them. And as a result, hardcore collectors would want all the different versions, because even though most of the time they didn't change up anything on them other than, the copyright line that said, CBS Canada instead of CBS USA or whatever, occasionally you did get different stuff. Like, I know when we were in England a few years ago, you locked onto a copy of Pink Floyd's Relics album that had a special cover that was only in the UK.
Only in the UK, yeah.
So different cover artwork entirely.
Yeah, definitely. I remember we went to Austria, and there was a record store, and I had too much crap in my luggage. I couldn't buy anything. I was so bad. But yeah, no.
The weight with the vinyl and everything, it is an issue.
Yeah, exactly. I have to bring an extra suitcase when we travel.
Oh, and I'm going to tell a sad little story, because back when I first really got big into music in the 80s and was buying my vinyl, and I was buying the various editions, like the Japanese pressings, and spending all my hard-earned paper route money on things like that, I moved out on my own when I was 16 for the first time, and I had this apartment, and I didn't have a lot of money, so I made a bookshelf out of cinder blocks and wooden boards, and I made one section for my vinyl that I had collected, and that was a very special shelf for me. Yes, I know. And the winter years came along, and there was this was in Canada, so it's a cold thing there, and there was water pipes that would heat the apartment that went around the place. Well, those water pipes were really warm, and they ran right underneath my vinyl collection.
Oh.
And it did not fare well. I lost a lot. I can't bear to throw them out. I mean, they're probably still in here somewhere in their warped little states, but...
Yeah, it sucks, because I can relate to that. Like, I literally had 90% of my album collection stolen at one time or damaged from just hanging around with the wrong people and crowd,
Right.
And then I was moving around a lot, so I asked my cousin to hold on to all my good collection, the ones I really cherished, and she did. I ended up getting those back eventually, but sometimes I'll see an album that's going for literally $2 or $3 grand on some of the pressings that I've actually collected back in the day, and that's gotten stolen. And I just, I think I went through a phase where I didn't want to buy any more records because of my collection getting stolen. But yeah, it sucks when you lose your stuff like that. It sucks.
Vinyl.
Yeah,
it's a special thing, and we'd love to hear from you about your views on vinyl, if you buy it to this day, and what excites you about it and what pisses you off about it. I'd like to hear it all. So,
I'm sorry. I just wanted to bring us up some interesting facts. Did you know that Gen Z generation buys more vinyl than millennials?
I had no idea.
Yeah, some research I was doing before we got on the show. It's Gen Z is buying more vinyl than millennials are, which is a good sign. That's very good.
Well, I mean, this is my turntable right here, and I do spend time in this room. We've got speakers hooked up all over the place, and it's fun. I don't know what else to say. It's just fun to go leafing through the record collection and pulling something out. I mean, there was so much released on the vinyl too back then to entice you to buy it that you didn't get on the CDs. Like, I have back when I was collecting in the late '80s, and I was listening to bands like Japan or it's when I first came across Iron Maiden, and I was listening to all kinds of cool stuff. They would put out vinyl singles that would have like rare live shows or live songs, or they would have alternate takes or maybe B-sides that they had never released anywhere else. And it was always such a wonderful treasure when you came across one of those in a record. And that was one of the great pleasures, was the search. Right? The search.
The search.
And
didn't have internet.
We didn't have internet. You didn't have a way of hunt. You didn't have eBay. You didn't have any of this crap. You had to go looking for it. But
I discovered a lot of bands just buying the album covers, because I used to go to my local record store and $2.99, $3.99 a record for a used record back then, and you would just go, oh wow, who's this? That's how I got turned on to like Misfits and stuff like that. Just the album covers. Just flipping through. I mean, I took my chances, That's another thing about vinyl. It's like you tend to listen to the music more, because it's not like you could fast forward everything. You literally have to lift that needle up and skip it to the next song. So you kind of appreciate the songs more, it seems like, because, you actually had to listen to it. And now you can just fast forward, right? Even the new stuff that you like.
Yeah, click, track 7, please.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, you always knew that track number 7 was going to be one of the best songs on the album. And
I'm truly convinced, if that's how records were back in the day, like if you get to skip songs at will, because we had tapes, and no CDs. It was just record tapes, and so it was really a pain in the ass, But I really think it would have changed the whole dynamic of what are hit songs and how well bands do.
I'll tell you a funny story. When I was quite young and first really getting into music, and I was buying all this vinyl, we didn't really own a turntable in our house at the time, but I was buying the vinyl anyway. So I had a paper route. Yes, I had a paper route, and I bought one of the very first Walkmans, if you remember the portable cassette players, and that was a revelation in and of itself. But I wanted to hear all this music that I was buying, and so I, being the industrious young man that I was, I would go to the homes of the people who were subscribers to the newspaper, and when I went to collect for the weekly amounts for the papers, if I saw that they had a turntable with a tape recorder in their living room or whatever, I would say, oh, do you think you would mind terribly if I came over on Saturday and transferred a few of my albums to cassette on your turntable? I made some great friends that way. And I also got to discover some new music, because they would have record collections as well, and they would see how excited I was about music, and they would turn me on to certain music that I still listen to this day. I mean, that's how I discovered Meatloaf. I remember that very distinctly.
Yeah.
So, but and then as a celebration of vinyl these days, we also have this event called Record Store Day. Now, there's many camps of thought about Record Store Day, and there are pros and cons to it. I mean, if you don't know what Record Store Day is, basically the labels all got together and said, we're going to help the independent little record stores that are still out there, and we're going to put out it started off with one day a year. We're going to put out a bunch of limited edition vinyl releases that you can only get in record stores. And the problem was, they only press a very limited number of them, usually between 1,000 or so of them. And when you figure out how many record stores there are in the world right now, when you have 1,000 copies of an album and it's got to be distributed to all of them, odds are you're probably not going to get more than 1, maybe 2 copies of any given release. Excuse me. So you see the list come out of what the releases are going to be on Record Store Day. Something catches your eye.
Yeah.
The odds of you finding it?
Yeah, right. And for some reason, I don't know why, but record store owners hate Record Store Day.
Well, yeah, because of that very reason. I think that they get inundated with people who come, and it's just a continual wave of disappointment.
Yeah.
oh, I heard Pink Floyd has a mono version of their first album out on for Record Store Day. Yeah, we had one copy. It sold 1 minute after we opened the doors. Sorry. Do you want to go look at the other stuff? No, right. See ya. So.
Record store to me it holds dear in my heart because I used to go with my cousin. We used to on Record Store Day. We used to get up really early in the morning, and we would map out a city, like mostly Orange County, that area up there. We would map out maybe 12 or 15 record stores in like a 25-mile radius, and we would find breweries or pubs, and we would just go have a beer, go to the record store, have a beer, go to another record store, go have a slice of pizza, go to another record store, and we ended up getting a lot of the albums that you couldn't find, and it was something we did every year.
No. I'm a little luckier. With my industry contacts, I can usually reach out to certain labels and say, do you think I could get a copy of XYZ record? And they go,
that's no fair, cheater.
Speaking as a big benefiter of that, you better be quiet. Anyway, so that's about it. That's a little diatribe on our love of vinyl, and to give you an idea of what's going on in the world of vinyl from behind the scenes. I want to thank Sean for joining me again today, and of course Boomer for making his appearances throughout the show. And I want to thank all of you for your continued support. We're always looking for feedback from you. You can email us at acetalksmusic@gmail.com or leave comments right below the podcast that you're watching or listening to now. And also, if you're so inclined, come and join us at our After Hours show and see the road stories we talk about from our years of touring on the road with various bands. And that's on the Patreon platform, so patreon.com. And we look forward to seeing you over there. In the meantime, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.